Hello, and welcome to my first ever devlog for my upcoming game, Project Midas. With this video series, I intend to document my progress while I create my first ever game using Unity and C#, and in the process, answer the question, how can video games be used as a medium for creative expression? With each new entry, I hope to focus on a different aspect of the design process behind what goes into creating a game, and the challenges that I'll inevitably face. Do I really have any real authority when it comes to video game production? Well, no. I mean, I thought this was the pinnacle of programming genius. But I do believe that I can provide some insight and tips, at the very least. So, with my high school graduation and self-worth on the line, let's begin. Before we get into the first aspect of game creation that I'd like to talk about, and how it applies to my project, I'd like to take some time to discuss the plans I have for my own game so far. You play as Midas, named after her innate ability to turn anything she touches into gold. It seems pretty cool and all until you realize that the government doesn't really take too kindly to people who can break the economy and murder people with one touch. So, you end up locked inside a secret maximum security prison. The main premise of the game is to escape the building as it collapses, due to a reason unknown to the player. Gameplay-wise, it's supposed to be an infinite runner type of game, with inspiration taken from Alto's Adventure, Webbed, and basically every generic parkour game ever. Real original, I know, but I'm just a huge fan of fast-paced games, as well as wacky physics, so something like this was bound to happen eventually. So, one of the first key concepts to grasp about game design is the game feel, or juiciness, as it's referred to by professionals. To quote Wikipedia, game feel, sometimes referred to as game juice, is an intangible tactile sensation experienced when interacting with video games. Okay, cool, I feel certain sensations while doing my math homework. What's so special about video games? Well, game feel tends to fall into a few categories. Input generally refers to how controls reflect in-game. Faster-paced games require quick and snappy input to feel immersive. Remember, gamers will always blame the controls, not the player, so it's best to not make their complaints valid. If the player has creative and interesting ways to move around, the environment needs to reflect this in order to get the most mileage out of your movement mechanics. This is known as context. If you have the ability to swing from webs, it's a lot more fun to have big, open areas to move around in, rather than being cramped up in small rooms. Aesthetics are just that, the aesthetics. In order for a game to feel nice, it has to look the part, too. You don't need a master's degree in art to have a good aesthetic, but just like your elementary school teachers have taught you, try coloring inside the lines, please. Even simple polish effects such as bloom can add a lot to your game, for virtually no extra work. Obviously, there are exceptions to these guidelines, and even exceptions to these exceptions, but knowing the basic principles of game feel can really add a lot to your game. Now, throw everything I just told you out the window because I'm about to show you the prototypes for what I'm working on right now. I've been working on separate prototypes simultaneously, trying to wrap my head around how to approach programming each mechanic of my game. Some parts are going better than others, but for someone with a PhD in procrastination, I'd say I'm doing okay. The main prototypes I'm showing here are for the grappling mechanic, as well as some early movement ideas from before I even had a game concept. I do have to admit that I spent far too long just playing around with the grappling hook, thanks to my incredible ability to be able to be distracted by virtually anything, but at least that proves that so far, the movement is pretty satisfying. Here are some early art assets for the running and sliding animations. They could use some work, but for my first time working with pixel art animations, they do look pretty cool. So, what did I learn from these 16 total hours of work? Well, in my experience, creating rough sketches is a must. It is so much easier to program something when you already have a visual idea of what you want to happen. One problem I faced was trying to rotate the player based on the angle of the surface they were standing on. Without a few rough drafts of what it might look like and what I'd have to do, I don't think I would have gotten this far. While working, I also tried to have a question guiding me throughout a specific aspect of my game, different from the one guiding my entire project. How can I achieve fluidity in movement was a question that popped up often, and the answer heavily related to the controls. This ties back to the idea of game feel and how input can have a drastic effect on how well the players will perceive the game. So, I've realized a few things about myself while trying to attempt this project. It is very hard to stay motivated on a single idea, especially when I come up with so many new concepts all the time. I'm hoping that by having a different focus each month, my work process will differ slightly, giving me at least a few extra hours of motivation, before my brain decides to hyper-focus on the molecular formula of mayonnaise and how it theoretically should be able to be used as soap. Anyways, my next video should be about the art and animation in games, and I'd like to know how the animations in video games differ from those of animated shows and movies, as well as how the same animation principles such as squash and stretch are used in a pixel art medium. I should have the answer to these questions as well as having finished most if not all of the concept art for my game by next month. Anyways, thank you for listening to me ramble for so long, and I will see you next time.